Section 5, just like your previous sections, got a bunch of definitions. I'm going to start with those, and then we'll come back to some notes. Let me get the computer set up here. And once again, these vocabulary words are going to be on Alex for you on Google Classroom. You can find these anytime you want them. So as you're getting ready for the test here in a couple weeks, this is where they're at, chapter 1 vocabulary.
Okay.
And section 5, I think we have 6 of them today. Now, when it comes to the vocabulary, this question came up in one of the other classes. Will we have to know these on our own? Yes is the answer. These are things you have to know. I think I said just section 6. I meant section 5. Okay. Section 5, a bunch of definitions that you're going to need to know, and these you will use all the way through the entire year. First one is adjacent angles. The word adjacent means next to. So adjacent angles are going to be right next to each other. Let's look at a picture over here. These two angles are right next to each other, angle ABM and angle CBM. Those two are right next to each other. You'll notice they share a common vertex, and they also have a side in common, this side going right through the middle, ray BM. And that's how we define it. Two angles, they lie on the same plane, they have a common vertex and a common side. The no common interior points, what that means is if I pick a point on the inside of this angle, it's not on the inside of this angle, and vice versa. If I pick a point on the inside of this angle, it's not inside of that angle. So in other words, they're next to each other. Those two angles right there are next to each other. That makes them adjacent angles. So when you see the word adjacent, think next to. Adjacent angles are next to each other. Any questions with that? Okay, let's go to a linear pair. When you see the word linear, what do you think?
Line.
Line, you think line. Pair is how many? 2. So here's your definition. It's going to be a pair, 2, pair of adjacent angles with non-common sides that are opposite ways. When I come over here to this picture, I've got 2 lines intersecting. When I have 2 angles next to each other that form a straight line, that means they are a linear pair. So I've got a couple of examples. I've got several examples here. You look at it, this angle here, PNB, and angle BNM. If you put those 2 angles right next to each other, they form this straight line. Okay, you could also do it with these angles here, angle ANP and angle PNB. They're right next to each other. They form this straight line right here. That makes them a linear pair. You'll see a bunch of linear pairs this year. Any questions with linear pair? Okay. Vertical angles, we're going to do a bunch of stuff, especially when we get to, I think it's chapter 3, vertical angles. Vertical angles are 2 non-adjacent angles formed by 2 intersecting lines. Non-adjacent means they're not next to each other, and they're formed by intersecting lines. Here's your 2 intersecting lines. Vertical angles you can think of as being across from each other. So I'm going to take this picture here. Angle PNB, which angle is non-adjacent to that? That would be right across from angle PNB. What do you think, Lily? A and M right down here. A and M, those 2 are right across from each other. They're vertical angles. Let's go over here on the right. Angle BNM. What would be its vertical angle? Right across from it. I know you know it. Let's try someone else. Anybody else think they can give us that vertical angle? Across from BNM. What do you think, D?
NAM?
NAM?
AN.
Oh, ANM? Close. BNM and ANM are right next to each other. Those would be adjacent angles. We want to be across from BNM. Which one's across from B and M? Walker. P and A, there you go. P and A, this angle right here is right across from B and M. So when you see vertical angles, think vertical angles are across from each other. You'll see a bunch of those. Complementary angles, I'm sure you've talked about complementary before. Complementary angles add up to 90. Now there's a couple different ways this could show up. In your picture here, you've got these two angles, 1 and 2. When you put them together, you get this little box in the corner, which means it's a right angle. A right angle is how many degrees? 90. So angles 1 and 2 here would add up to 90. That means angles 1 and 2 are complementary. So if they're connected, they'll form a right angle. If they're not connected to each other, then they would be separate like this. And then their two angles would just have to add up to 90. Here you've got 35, here you have 55. 35 and 55 add up to 90, so that makes them complementary. So sometimes they are connected, sometimes they are not. Questions with complementary? If people remember complementary from the past. Okay, if we have complementary, what else are we going to have? Complementary always goes with what? Supplementary. Supplementary add up to 180. Now think of geometry. A geometric figure, if it adds up to 180, what's 180 degrees look like? Straight line. So that's what's going to happen on your picture here. If they're supplementary and they're connected to each other, they're going to form a straight line, like this one right here. Angles 1 and 2, they are supplementary because they form a straight line. We just had another name for angles 1 and 2. Anybody remember what it is? Angles 1 and 2 are right next to each other. They form a straight line. What do we call that? Oh, that's C. Right up here. Only two words, only two choices. Linear pair, yes. Linear pair is going to form a straight line. So when I come down to supplementary, if they're connected to each other, they'll form a straight line. You could say angles 1 and 2 are supplementary, or you could also say they're a linear pair. That's the same type of thing. If they're not connected to each other, like these two right here, then they just have to add up to 180. 30 and 150 add up to 180. That makes them supplementary. All right. Those two. Perpendicular. I'm not sure if you've heard this one before or not. Perpendicular are lines, rays, segments. They're going to form right angles. So when you see the word perpendicular, they're going to form right angles. Here's a picture of perpendicular lines. These two lines intersect. They form this right angle here. That right angle makes them perpendicular. When they're perpendicular, they'll form a right angle. Now, the symbol for perpendicular is an upside down capital T. So this right here reads segment AB is perpendicular to line C. These two things right here form a right angle. That makes them perpendicular. It's going to be too much to remember, or you guys will be able to hang on to it. Got it? No problem. That's it. We've already done perimeter, circumference, and area, right? So that's it. Okay, questions over any of those definitions there? All right, now let's go to some notes over this. What we're going to do on your tests, quizzes, homework, we're going to give you a picture and we're going to make you identify these things. So it'll look a lot like yesterday. All right, in your notes, we're going to draw a picture. We'll call this first one letter A. And actually, there's a couple directions first. The directions are going to tell us that line AE gives us an upside down capital T. Does anybody remember what that stands for? Perpendicular. AE and CE are going to be perpendicular to each other. Easy way to remember perpendicular. That upside down capital T, what kind of an angle does it make? Makes a right angle. That's what perpendicular is. So we're going to get a picture here in a second where these two are perpendicular. They're also going to tell us that angle BHE is 155. And angle BHG is 75. And this is very similar to what you'll see on the quiz, or actually the test. I'll go over this in a couple weeks when we do our test. They give you some directions, then they're going to give you a picture. So let's start with the picture. Here's line AE. Sometimes they're going to put the little dots next to the A and E, sometimes they don't. We're going to have CF coming through like this. I'm going to stop at that point because we know something about lines AE and CF. What do we know about them? They do intersect. What else do we know about them?
Perpendicular.
They're perpendicular. Those are perpendicular. That means they're going to form a right angle. So I'm going to put a right angle in there. Now, if you wanted to, you could go a little bit further. If this one's a right angle and these two make a straight line, what's this one got to be? It's got to be a right angle. So if you wanted to, you could put a box there. And you just keep going all the way around. These two make a straight line. This one's 90, this one has to be 90. Same thing with these two. They form a straight line. This one's 90, this one has to be 90. So if you wanted to, you could put 4 right angles on there. Usually they'll just put 1. All right, what else do we need to add in here? We're going to put a line coming through center point like this. We're going to have points on there of G and D. And we need one more. We're going to have one ray coming out through point B. And what we're doing here today, we're going to kind of combine what we did yesterday in section 4 with what we're doing here today. We've got these two numbers here. BHE is 155. If I come up to my picture here, oops, I need an H in here. H is going to be the center point in the middle. That's where H is at. They're telling us angle BHE is 155. BHE goes from point B to H to E. That angle. And then BHG is 75. That's going from B to H to G. That one's 75. I feel like I'm missing something here. No, let me move from there. Okay. I wish I wouldn't have put these other boxes in here because it makes it a little bit harder to see. But at this point, let's go to this BHE as 155. BHE combines all of those. This part right here is 90. And if all 3 of those add up to 155, what could I do to find angle BHC? Walker, what do you think? There you go. 55 minus 90. That's going to give us 65. That's 65 degrees for that angle. And if that angle is 65, then we can find BHG. BHG through here. Well, let's start with the one next to it. Let's start with BHA. These two angles right here form a right angle. So they're going to add up to 90. Take 90 minus 65. It's going to be 25 degrees here. Okay, that gets us to that point. We got 90, we got 90. BHG, where's BHG? That's this one here. Can't quite get that one. I'm missing something here. Let me go back to my notes. Yep. Okay, I am missing something. This angle CHD is 40 degrees. That would have to be given to us. Now, this is going to tie into vertical angles. Miss vertical angles. May have to go back to my vocabulary. Oh, we did talk about vertical angles, didn't we? Straight across from each other? Yeah, we talked about that. Okay. Now, one thing I did not mention with vertical angles. Vertical angles will always be congruent to each other. So when angles are across from each other, they're always going to be congruent. So an angle CHD, if that one's 40, what is angle CHD's vertical angle? What do you think, Lou? GHF, that's going to be also 40 degrees. Vertical angles are always congruent. 40 degrees here. Now we can kind of work our way around. Let's go back to these two angles. They make a right angle. If this one's 40, what's this one got to do? They make a right angle. That's going to be 50. Those are going to add up to 90 degrees. Now let's do vertical angles again. This one's 50. If you go straight across from it, its vertical angle would be 50 degrees. And then we don't really need to mark this one down here. This box is 90 degrees. So we've got all the angles we need. That's kind of what we did yesterday. Now we're going to name some different things. So I want us to name the following. Let's start with number 1. When we do this, there's going to be more than one correct answer. In fact, when you do the homework tonight, the answer key is going to have several of the correct answers. You just have to have one of them. And this is going to go back and test us on our definitions that we talked about a little bit ago. Number 1, they want us to name a pair of adjacent angles. There are many adjacent angles in this picture. We just have to pick out a set of them. 2 adjacent angles. Who remembers what adjacent angles are? See fingers move. Perry, what do you think?
It's 2 angles that combine to make one, right?
2 angles combined to make one. Yep, they're going to be right next to each other. So looking at your picture up here, can anybody give me an example of 2 angles that are right next to each other? Form one. Perry, what do you think? We want an angle. You need 3 letters to name an angle. A, B, B's up here. H is in the middle. You're going to have to use H. Walker, what do you think? CHD. Did you say DHE? She is right here. Those 2 are next to each other. They are a pair of adjacent angles because they're right next to each other. They have this common side. They have a common vertex at point H. Adjacent angles are always right next to each other. Okay, there are lots of different adjacent angles up here. You could have said AHB and BHF. Those 2 are next to each other. You could have picked these 2, the 65 and the 40. Lots of examples of adjacent angles. So when you see adjacent angles, remember they're across from each other. Second one we're going to name is a linear pair. All right, remember with this, when you see the word linear, what should you think? Line. A linear pair is going to be 2 angles that when you put them together make a straight line. Once again, there's lots of different examples up here. I'm going to start you off. Let's take angle GHF. Can anybody tell me what angle I would have to put next to angle GHF to make a straight line? Lily, what do you think? CHD, you're close. GHF and CHD would be vertical angles. We want an angle right next to this one that's going to make a straight line. You're a little bit ahead of us there. Anybody pick out an angle that you put next to angle GHF to make a straight line? Dean, what do you think? What did you say?
AHF?
AHF. Not quite. Those two, that's gonna be a 90 degree. We want a straight line. Let me put some color on this. That thing in green. I want to get a straight line out of that. Ava, what would I have to put next to it? CH what? CHB. Up here? Nope, those two are not next to each other. Dean, try again.
CHD.
CHD. We already tried that one. Those two are vertical.
I'm an FH.
FHD, where's that? Yep, FHD, there you go. FHD is this angle. If I color that in green, FHD comes up this way. There's my straight line. So GHF and FHD would be a linear pair. Now, the linear pair can be hard to see sometimes, so let's try another one of those. Let's take angle CHD. I'm going to put this red. CHD is right here in red. There's actually two different answers that work here. Can anybody give me one of the angles we can put next to that red angle CHD to get a straight line? Dean, what do you think?
CHG.
CHG, let's see, CHG, yes. CHG brings me out this way. There's CHG. Those two right next to each other make that straight line. Run out of colors, but let's try one more. Let's take angle EHF. Once again, there's more than one answer that would work. EHF is a right angle. So in order to make a straight line, I want to get to 180 degrees. What would the other angle have to be? Barry, what do you think? AHF would work, yep. AHF and EHF, those two right next to each other make that straight line. Since angle EHF is a right angle, remember the angle that combines with it to be a linear pair would also have to be a right angle. 90 plus 90. All right, does anybody need to see more linear pairs? Of all the ones we have the most trouble with, that team tends to be the one. Oh no, we got a couple more. Here's number 3. We want a pair of vertical angles. And if you've been paying attention, some people have already given us a pair of vertical angles. Vertical angles, we describe them as being across from each other. But I think they give us a pair of angles that are across from each other. Walker, what do you think? GHF, and what was the other one? CHD, very good. GHF is 40 degrees. CHD is 40 degrees. Those two are right across from each other. That would be your pair of vertical angles. So angle GHF, CHD. That's not the only pair of vertical angles. There's another one up there. Remember, your vertical angles are always congruent. Anybody pick out another pair of vertical angles? Walker, what do you think? AHG is 50, and what else? DHE is 50. Those are vertical angles. Right across from each other, they're both congruent. All right, let's go to complementary. Go back to your definitions. Complementary are going to add up to what? What do complementary angles add up to? Yep. 180 is supplementary. What's complementary going to be? It's going to be 90. Yep. So we want a pair of angles that are going to add up to 90 degrees. Coming up to our picture here, there's several different examples you can pick. Anybody pick out 2 angles that would add up to 90? Walker, what do you think? AHC. AHC, where's the AHC is a right angle. What 2 angles form that? Oh, AHE is a straight line. That's gonna be 180. Go back to what you said, AHC. That's a right angle. What two angles do you have to put together to get angle AHC? What two angle measurements do you have to put together to get that angle? See it? Layla, what do you think?
AHB and BHC.
There you go, AHB and BHC. Those two angles right there, the 25 and 65, put them together, gives you a right angle. That would make them complementary. They add up to 90. Angle AHB and angle BHC. Let's do another one of those because there's a bunch of complementary angles up there. Can anybody give us another set of angles that will add up to 90? Which make them complementary. Terry, what do you think? CHD and DHE. You got these two right here, 40 and 50, add up to 90. That would be another. You can write that down if you want to. Anybody need to see more examples with complementary? Okay, last one, let's do supplementary. Supplementary, we said are going to add up to 180. In geometry, what's a 180-degree angle look like? $180. Straight line. There you go. It's going to be a straight line. So what we want to do is pick two angles that put together to make a straight line. Okay, why don't you go there? It said CH what? CHF is a straight line. What two angles are you put together to make it? That would work. Anybody give us two angles to put together to get CHF? Walker, what do you think? CHB and FHB. Oh, CHE. And what else? FH. Yes, that would work. This right angle and this right angle, those two give you a straight line. That would work. CHE and angle EHF. You may need to see another one with supplementary. Good with those? Okay. Not quite. Got two more examples. This we did with just numbers. Now you've also got to be able to do it with some algebra. These are a little bit easier to do though. We'll call this one letter B. They're going to tell us to find x. And we're going to have two lines that intersect. And this one's a pretty quick one to do. They're going to give us just two angles. Down here we have an x plus 10. Up here we have a 6x minus 4. Those two angles are right across from each other. We had a vocabulary word for that. What do you call angles that are right across from each other? Angles that are right across from each other. They are going to be congruent, but that's not the name we're looking for. What do you call angles right across from each other? Vertical, yes. Vertical angles are right across from each other. And then like Gavin said, or you landed? You're landed. Landon said vertical angles will always be congruent. So I'm going to put the little arc in there to show that they're the same. If they're congruent to each other, to find x, what you would do is put them equal to each other. Then you just have to do the algebra. If you subtract the x, you'll get 5x on the left. You add the 40, you'll get 50 on the right. Dividing by 5 gives you x equals 10. They asked us to find x. We found x. That's all the further you have to go. Okay. If they ask you to find an angle, you may have to put the number back in to find the angle. You'll just have to watch directions. Any questions with that? Okay, one last one. This time we're going to find x and y. Very similar picture. Two lines intersecting. This time they're going to give us 3 different angles. And we need to find both x and y. It doesn't matter which order you find them. So if something jumps out at you, you can go with it right away. But in this case, there is only one way to do it. I'm going to start with the x. If you look at the x plus 5 and the 2x minus 20, those two are right across from each other. It makes them what kind of angles? Vertical angles. What do we know about vertical angles? They're always congruent. So these 2 angles right here are going to be congruent. So to find x, I just put them equal to each other. X plus 5 will equal 2x minus 20, just like we did on the last one. When we subtract x from here, you get x. When you add 20 to this side, you get 25. On x, that's all the further we have to go with that part. Now we also need to get the y. So I'm going to look at these 2 angles here, the x plus 5 and the y. The x plus 5 is this green angle. The y is this green angle. If you put those 2 angles together, they make a straight line. What does that tell us? It's going to be 180 degrees. These 2 angles are going to add up to 180. Okay, that's something else the book will always kind of expect you to see. If you see 2 angles next to each other, they make a straight line. That means they add up to 180. Now, I know this one is y. This one's x plus 5. I already found 25, so let's put that in here. I put 25 plus 5 in there. This is going to be 30 degrees. We said if these 2 angles form a straight line, they add up to 180. If this one's 30, what's y got to be? 180. Take 180 minus 30, you get not 180. What was it again? 150, yes. These 2 add up to 180. Take 30 away from 180. Y is going to be 150. You need the visual of that, 180 minus 30. So sometimes you're going to do it with just numbers. Sometimes you're going to have some algebra in there. You're going to have to be able to do it both ways. Any questions about those? Yeah.
So is x 30 or is it x 25?
X is 25. X is 25. The whole angle is 30. Okay. So this angle would be 30. But X is 25. Good question. Any other questions with that? Okay. Now, homework for today. Let me shut off my recording here real quick.